it's difficult not to fall for the temptation of trying to think we can have heaven on earth. But I do think we can get close to it, at least for moments, if we do what we're supposed to do, right? Like, so I think if we actually are successful in promoting virtue, in allowing or helping young men specifically find their way to the church, find their way to Christ, develop a true, honest relationship with Him. I think the first thing we're going to see, and probably the most important, is.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Silas Mähner. Catholic Founders is on a mission to help Catholics launch and grow their businesses in a way that helps them become saints because of their businesses, not in spite of them. As Catholic entrepreneurs, we are not created to achieve earthly glory. We are called to be instruments of God's will in the world and to bring glory to Him. Before we start, if you are interested in getting your business and your services in front of hundreds of Catholic business owners every week, consider sponsoring this podcast or the newsletter that we put out. You can reach out to admin@catholicfounders.com to learn more, and we'll be in touch. We really appreciate your support. All right, folks, today we are speaking with Juan Dominguez, the founder of Ad Aeternum, a publication previously called Simple Man. So if you spend any time on the Catholic Spaces on Substack, you have likely run into his work. Juan has built a massive community dedicated to helping young men recover virtue and live with purpose in the modern world. In today's conversation, we talked a lot about the interior life, the responsibility that Catholic men have to be public with their faith. We talked also about how entrepreneurship kind of fills that desire to conquer in the modern era. And we also touched on how to engage with the AI age without letting go of the best parts of our humanity. Juan is a lot of fun to speak with, so I'm sure you will enjoy this conversation. Be sure to check out his Substack, Ad Aeternum, as well. And if you speak Latin, I'm sure you can find that, but if you can't, it's Aeternum, Ad Aeternum. All right, folks, I pray that you listen to this with an open heart and that you allow the Holy Spirit to guide you and help you to learn how He is calling you to better integrate the faith into how you run your business so that you can become a better instrument of God's will. All right, enjoy the episode. All right, brother. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, Silas, I'm doing well. Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you, man. So we finally get to see the face behind the publication. Some people may not know. So just give us a quick introduction to who you are and what you're up to and maybe why you're a little famous on Substack.
I wouldn't say famous. Hopefully not. Not really interested in that at this time. But yeah, so my name is Juan. I'm a writer, entrepreneur, and speaker. I'm originally from Colombia. Well, what I do in Substack, as you mentioned, is I run the Ad Aeternum Substack, which is a best-selling Substack focused mainly on helping Catholic men, and I would say Christian men broadly, even though it has, of course, a Catholic focus as I'm Catholic, recover virtue and start living purposefully in the modern world. I would say that's my baby, my project. I've been working at it for over 5 years. It's gone through a lot of changes. We changed the name, we changed the brand, but it's always had like that focus, helping young men specifically, give them a little bit of guidance, share some things that I've learned in my walk through life, and hopefully help them find a purposeful way to go through life that is devoted to service, that allows them to grow, to feel at peace, and also to find community, because I think there's a lot of young men out there who are very, very lonely and desperately in need of guidance. It started as very much a passion project. It started to grow. The Lord has been very provident with it and has allowed me to make a living out of it. So now I do that full time, just writing the articles, writing the essays. We also have a YouTube channel where we post video essays, and it's growing. So it's been a huge blessing. That's what I do. That's my 9 to 5 nowadays, and yeah, so that's the story behind Ad Aeternum.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, what led you to want to start this in the first place? Because it sounds like, even though there's been some changes, like the overall theme has been the same, right? It's helping Christian men broadly to kind of reclaim, I guess you could say, masculinity and live virtuously and all these things. Was that truly the kind of the objective at the beginning, and why did you decide to start it?
I would say yes, that was the objective at the beginning. The only difference was that I actually, when it started, it wasn't even Christian. It was just masculinity, secular masculinity focused. And through that process of writing about masculinity, I myself rediscovered my faith very early on and came back to the Catholic Church. I never stopped being a Catholic or calling myself a Catholic, but I definitely wasn't a practicing Catholic. So the intention, even though initially it was secular, it was always very, I would say, very genuine, in the sense that I did really want to help young men find a way to live life with purpose, because I just saw in the men around me, in my generation specifically and younger generations, that men were very lost, very lonely. That there were a ton of ideologies that were only starting to gain a foothold, feminism, socialism, cultural Marxism, and all that stuff, relativism. So I just something in me didn't concur with those ideologies and with the way most people were living life. Probably the Holy Spirit. Now that I know, right? So I just felt compelled to write and offer maybe an alternative vision of how to live life as a man, especially among or in the midst of a time and an era that has very much become about hating men and all they stand for, right? So that was the intention, to just tell men, like, no, you can be a man. You should try to act like a man and be masculine. And of course, that was very helpful for me as well, to try and find my own way and try to find sort of my own way to live life like a man.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things I want to touch on there. Number one is with content. I personally really enjoy creating content because it helps me clarify my own thoughts. I'm very bad at kind of actually thinking through what I have in my head. I need to speak it. That's why I like to do podcasting a lot. But I'm curious, when you started, was this largely that you believed you had something to say for other people, or you just wanted to do it to help yourself?
I think mainly I felt like I had some stuff that I wanted to share. So I had read a lot of books, mostly about self-improvement. I had gotten into it for a couple of years before starting the project. But then very quickly it became clear that it was also helping me a lot. And also, just without going any further than the accountability provided by, for example, me preaching a message of discipline or strength or whatever, like I either became that or I was just a hypocrite. So it was very, very fun and very cool to see how this project and writing about these topics started to shape me as well, almost involuntarily. Eventually, it became voluntarily, by the way, because I started researching and maybe speaking about stuff that I also wanted to learn. But initially, it was mostly about me sharing some stuff that I had learned. And then it became like also an academic pursuit of mine, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I think that's a really interesting point, the idea of accountability of your own actions in the own way you're living because you're preaching, so to speak, about it. I find this a lot with Catholic founders, is that, there's times where I don't want to, pick up the small crosses of running my business because it's just super annoying. But I'm like, I literally just wrote a blog post about that. Like, I have to do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that I'm curious if you have any perspectives on this, but it's almost, I do think there is something about our Catholic faith where, because we are supposed to preach the gospel at all times to all people, that is our own, like, each person has their own little version of that, right? Their own a bit of accountability, because they ought to be speaking about their faith on a very regular basis, to the point where if you're not living it, people would say, well, what's going on? Like, what's the hypocrisy there? Do you have any perspectives on that?
I do, and I actually think that's one of the main culprits, I would say, of so many people developing a negative image of the Catholic Church. It's a shame, but I think it's precisely because we haven't been doing that properly, like us Catholic men and Catholic women, but men more specifically, that we haven't been really living examples of the gospel. So I have gotten into many conversations with many atheist friends, and almost always the reason they give for why they don't want to go near the church is because they saw some form of hypocrisy in the people that claim to be Catholic. So they will say something like, yeah, no, I used to go to prayer groups and rosary prayer groups, and I just saw that people were really not good people. The people that were there weren't really good people, and I didn't want anything else to do with them, right? So it's sad because, of course, that we Catholics know that that's not a reason to live the faith. But for someone who's just maybe giving it a try or starting to learn about it, Like, you are the representation of the gospel. You are the representation of what the Catholic Church stands for. So it's a huge responsibility to carry, even if you're not doing it publicly. Like, of course, especially if you're doing it publicly, but just in day-to-day life, in the conversations that you have with other people, we have a huge burden to bear. And I think we really haven't been understanding that and taking it with the seriousness that it deserves. So you see a lot of people that live their faith, but only privately, that they sort of use it maybe as an excuse to just keep sinning. Like, yeah, I'm always going to be a sinner, so I'll keep sinning. And they avoid really that striving for holiness and that genuinely trying to imitate Christ that all Christians are called to. So I think, like, of course, if you're doing it publicly, for example, with a project like this, with an evangelization project like Ad Eternum, Catholic Founders, then you have an even bigger burden. Because then if you fail, or if you act in a different, like, contrary to the Catholic principles, then you end up creating scandal and maybe leading a lot of people astray. But even the people who aren't doing public evangelization of any sort, we all have that responsibility to be the face of the gospel and to try our best to really because you are going to be maybe the only gospel that other people read. I don't know if that comes from a quote that I don't remember specifically, but you have to really internalize that and remember that.
No, I like that a lot. I think it's also pretty motivating to me personally whenever I do remember that, because there's a lot of things, there's a lot of information floating around, but whenever I recall these components about our faith, that we get to be the opportunity for somebody to know about God, right? To know about the fact that they're loved, and especially nowadays with so much, I guess you could say, just like digital, like lack of humanity in everything we experience, right? We're interacting through screens all the time. Like, we don't actually have that many friends, and also we're increasingly, like, apparently dialoguing with AI in so many cases. Like, people commenting aren't even real people anymore. It's not their words. There's just this lack of human connection, and your human connection to that person that you encounter when you're ordering a burger or whatever can be the opportunity for them to come to know God. And it's a very simple thing. It can be such a small item that could really make a big impact. So speaking of simple, I do want to understand quickly, why did you go from, the brand was Simple Man and now it's called Ad Eternum. So can you explain just like real briefly why you ended up doing the rebrand and the rename?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was mostly because, as I said, Simple Men, when it started, it was just a secular project and a passion project. I didn't think it would grow as much. I didn't really put so much time and effort into considering the brand itself. So I just came up with that pen name, Simple Man blog, based on the song Simple Man, which I think the lyrics are very beautiful and I really like it. So it was just a fun, pen name that I came up with. And then it started growing and I realized, okay, I'm now making a living out of this. I'm dedicated full time to writing about this. It's now a Christian and specifically Catholic brand. Like, I need a brand that reflects that. I need a brand that also allows it to maybe grow into different new channels, and also a brand that I'm proud of and can stand behind. For example, I've been going to some events, leadership seminars, whatever, Catholic focused. And it's very different to introduce yourself like, I run this personal blog on Substack versus I'm the founder of a serious media company dedicated to restoring virtue and morality in the modern world, right? So I needed to elevate a little bit the standard of the business, make it a serious company, a serious business with a serious brand that I could then maybe expand into YouTube, for example, into physical products, into other stuff, whatever comes in the future. So it was just like a combination of those two factors. One, the professional side of things, like, okay, if I'm doing this full time, I want to really create something that is serious and that can grow over the long term. And then secondly, it has to have now a specifically faith-based focus, which it didn't have before. So it was a mix of those two things.
Do you think it's important to have a more accessible start to your project that's kind of like not necessarily explicitly Catholic or Christian when you begin? Because with you, this worked out that you grew the brand very, very large, and then you're going even more niche and focusing on kind of Christianity broadly, but specifically Catholic. And there's also our friend Johann Kurtz with Becoming Noble, which then, obviously he's becoming much more like openly Christian or openly talking about his faith, his Catholic faith. I'm just curious if you have a perspective on, like, when you start these types of projects, is it better to have a broader total potential market and be slightly more ambiguous and then go focus? Like, do you think that helped you grow a larger audience and then, like, you can now kind of focus it more?
I think it did. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. The other, I think both are good choices depending on what you want to do. So, for example, what Simple Man allowed me to do back then was, well, as you said, first grow a bigger audience, and then also be a little bit more subtle in communicating the faith when I had already returned to the faith, right? So it was sort of, if you think about it, like if it's a pipeline or a funnel of conversion, right? Like it's dependent on whether you want to be at the top of the funnel and just, get people through the door and maybe just thinking about, okay, this Christianity thing might have something to it. Or if you want to be a little bit further down the funnel with people who are already converting or like already know that they have that interest. So I wouldn't say one is better than the other. I actually don't think my decision to niche it down was good business-wise. Like I've lost a lot of followers.
Yeah.
That it's been difficult to pick up the engagement back up. So it was a decision that very much contradicted sound business practices. But I did believe like that was what God was calling me to do. So yeah. I just did it. But I honestly, one is necessarily better than the other. It's just two different ways of going about running the project.
Hey folks, as a quick reminder, we have recently launched The Faithful Steward. This is a free private deal flow newsletter for Catholic investors to be made aware of opportunities to invest in other Catholic-owned or led companies or projects. These deal types will range from startup investment opportunities to film opportunities to real estate, anything you can think of, it will be in there. And it's totally free. We are not charging for this. We are just trying to help connect the community. To sign up, you can go to CatholicDealFlow.com. That's CatholicDealFlow.com. How it works is when we get a deal, we make sure that these guys are Catholic. We will then package it up really nicely, send it over to you, and then you can take a look and decide if you would like to reach out. The benefit of this is that you get to remain completely anonymous from all those capital seekers while still getting the benefit of seeing those deals. So you get the benefit of seeing the deals without the publicity of being known. We are not gatekeeping here, so just trying to use our role as a community connector to help Catholics invest in each other and doing this all again for free. If you are a Catholic builder who is looking to raise capital, whether that again is for a film, for real estate, for a startup, or just a mom and pop brick and mortar business, you can go to CatholicDealFlow.com to sign up. You just submit your deck there and a bit of information about you. We'll reach out, we'll verify that you are in fact a practicing Catholic, then we'll package it all up and send it out to the newsletter, and if they're interested, they'll reach out to you. Again, that is CatholicDealFlow.com. It's completely free. You can sign up today. All right, back to the show. I do think there's something interesting about having the ability to communicate the virtue and the perspectives of morality when you're not using explicitly Catholic language, because it's very easy as a Catholic to talk to other Catholics about it because we have a shared language. I've noticed this recently where I went to an event that was largely attended by Catholics, but it wasn't like explicitly a Catholic entrepreneurship event. And I found myself like having discussions where I was like, oh, wait a minute, I can see the person's wheels spinning because they don't have the same language as I do. Like they're not grokking what I'm trying to say here. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should work on that, or maybe I don't know. Maybe I'll just continue focusing on the people who already know what I'm talking about. Now let's open this up a little bit. This is gonna be a bit of a can of worms, I think, but I'm curious your perspective on, we have, generally speaking, the emotions of young men having loneliness, having a lack of feeling of purpose or belonging in the world. This was something that's been building for a while for various reasons. And I think now we have something, it's obvious that there's some momentum, and there's a lot of creators now especially focused on supporting and trying to help young men understand their place in the world and be okay being masculine, etc. But on top of all of this, now we have this idea, or I shouldn't say this idea, this massively changing landscape because of AI. AI is going to change a lot of things, going to put a lot of people out of business, out of jobs. I'm curious if you have any perspective on AI and if it's going to continue pushing this trend more, or if it's going to radicalize young men. Like, I just want to get, let's open it up, like any direction you want to head. I'm just kind of curious to get your take on this, where we're going in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. I think we are at a breaking point where AI will be an amplifier of, like an amplifier like we've never seen before of what you already are. If you have managed to control maybe your phone addiction, your addiction to pornography, if you have managed to quit that, if you have made some progress and have already strengthened yourself against those negative things, then you will be able to use AI responsibly and in a way that amplifies the qualities and the virtues that you do have. On the other hand, if you haven't, so I really do fear for people that for example, are addicted to pornography, because what's coming with AI, and we're already seeing that, it's just, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like a level of access and customization when it comes to pornography that we had never seen before. So if you hadn't been able to control that drive, that addiction before that came, like now that it has come, it's going to be much more difficult. So like, that's not to try and cause any hopelessness or whatever. It's more to motivate that we're still, like, there's still time to fix your life, organize your interior life, quit those addictions, learn better habits, so that when that keeps happening, you are more prepared to face it and you're strengthened to face it. So I think it's going to be an amplifier. I am not, like, there's a lot of people who are completely against AI. I am not one of those. I do use it. You know, I don't use it for the main parts of my business. Like, it doesn't write the articles for me, but sometimes I like bounce ideas off with it. I brainstorm with it, and it's helpful, right? I think one of the clear lines that you have to have, and you have to be very intentional about this, is that you cannot, in things that are relational, you cannot ask it about relationship advice, you cannot ask it about spiritual advice, you cannot ask it about things that aren't really, that it's not qualified to give you answers, because it's not a thinking, living thing with a soul. So I think that's also when, like, where most people or many people fail or cross a line. It's like they end up chatting with AI as if it was a friend, as if it could give them advice, as if it knew them. So if you're using it as a tool, like the internet, like Google, like whatever, then you're probably safe. But when you start crossing that line where you develop a relationship with it, I think that becomes problematic, aside from what I mentioned about it being an amplifier. Mm-hmm. That's my overall perspective.
Yeah. What about this? I don't know if you're seeing this down as much in Latin America, but in the US right now, there's a huge, like, pushback publicly, both on left and right, against data center build out, because they view data center build out as synonymous with AI, which in many ways it is, obviously. And then you have these people like Sam Altman talking about universal basic income and how nobody has to work, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just curious, like, as more and more of these massive layoffs come at the expense of people, where, you know, it's mostly, it's probably not mostly, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be very wealthy people just, like, you know, trying to, like, rack up their stock price, like make their stock price go higher, make more money, not necessarily really investing in their communities. Like, instead they might just buy another yacht. Do you, like, what do you think that effect that's going to have on young men? And maybe give us the perspective that you have for people who have a life of virtue and the people who don't.
Yeah, that's a good question regarding, like, the first thing, the data centers in Latam and the overall, like, I would say, job market here when it comes to that. What's interesting about Latam is that there's still such a vast majority of the population who, like, lives and works informally, that, like, it becomes sort of a blessing, because you don't see that effect as much. Of course, among educated people with degrees and people who work in tech companies or whatnot, you do see that. But that's actually such a small minority of the country, and of most countries in Latam, that the overall effect is not as large, I would say. Regarding the other question, could you repeat what the final question was?
Yeah, mostly about, like, what is it going to look like or what is your perspective on young men experiencing job layoffs and at the expense of, like, it's just billionaires trying to get more money for themselves. They're not investing in their communities. And how do you think that people will respond to that? Will they respond when they have virtue, and how will people who don't have that virtue built up, how will they respond to those situations?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question, a difficult thing to predict. You know, like, you always, like, because we go through these cycles when you always think that maybe things are going to get catastrophically bad, and then somehow humanity finds a way to fix it, you know, and new jobs come up and people end up finding a way. But what I do think is that for the people specifically, sadly, for the men who might not have strengthened themselves in virtue in that way, and who perhaps don't have that perspective of actually always aiming for eternity, you know, and knowing, and really knowing rationally that we're here just temporarily, and this life is not the end. I think for them it's going to be very difficult to climb out of the hole they find themselves in, not only now, but after that, you know, after it becomes even more difficult to find jobs, after it becomes even more difficult to progress professionally. Like, my hopeful side says maybe those men who just professionally don't find a way to progress end up becoming priests, you know, or, like, end up maybe giving it a try to the religious vocation, and maybe God takes that and uses it to bless us with more vocations, with more religious vocations. But the realistic side of me says that maybe what we'll end up with is really a lot more depressed men, a lot more lonely men, a lot more suicides, sadly, and a lot more purposelessness. On the other hand, if you approach this and you have managed to strengthen yourself, develop virtue, keep your gaze set on eternity, you probably will approach this from as an opportunity in many ways, as an opportunity to be differently enough so that this doesn't impact you as much. And what I'm thinking here is there are certain human skills that are becoming more and more scarce, and thus will become more and more on demand, because regardless of how much we progress technologically, those human skills will always be needed, right? And they will always be prized. So I think if you keep that sort of strategic eye and view over this whole thing, and you fight against becoming just another one of the many who maybe let AI do their whole jobs for them, so they don't really have any real skills, right? Or who thought that we were way past thinking about philosophy, so now they can't even think or reason properly, or who thought that art is a thing of the past because AI now does it and are now creating artistic expressions or creating art in a way that is once again human. I think we're going to see a return, the demand is going to switch back to desiring things that are human, if that makes sense. Yes. I'm going a little bit all over the place, but I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
I certainly agree with that part. A couple of the things that, first of all, I appreciate the idea that maybe we'll get more priests because of it. I never thought about that. That's a new one for me. Maybe people will turn to the priesthood, and it makes me want to research. I'm curious if there is any research on what economic circumstances throughout history led to more people entering the priesthood. But I do agree with you. I guess the thing I'm always curious about is there's a couple things. The main thing I want to ask about next is this idea that when people are treated like numbers, when they are just kind of their humanity is rejected, it's hurtful. The reason it hurts is because we are created in the image and likeness of God, and we desire union. We desire unity with God. That is a transcendental. It's in our being that we seek it, right? We desire it. And when we're rejected, these things are bad. It's obviously bad. Sometimes people, in most cases, they can't put words to why they feel wronged, why they feel bad about it. But there's all this emotion, and I'm very worried, especially in America, because it seems there's a very large rise of, there's obviously a lot of people coming to the church right now, very good, but I also think that there's just generally this move towards the right in a way that is simply a reaction to the left and kind of the rejection of masculinity, I would say generally. And what I'm worried about is that this kind of people without virtue, they're just going to be seeking anarchy. All they want is the destruction of the other. And that's obviously not a virtuous perspective on anything. So that's what I'm a little bit worried about with this whole AI thing. And I think that we can shift this a little bit to how we can lead, because I want there to be alternatives as let's say the buildings are crumbling and the only thing that's remaining is the church, right? We see the Golden Dome, we see the church still standing. I'm hoping that people will be like, well, what the heck? That building's still standing. There must be something nice about there. Let's go. And this is what I really am hopeful for when it comes to Catholics being entrepreneurs and being just in general leaders in society, because we have security and peace, knowing that we are created in the image and likeness of God, that we have infinite dignity, and that no matter what our economic circumstances, we are loved, and we can have that kind of security of our mindset and welcome others into it. So this is a very long rant here, but what are your general takes on this, and how we can truly and intentionally engage these other people who are feeling, left behind, and how we can bring them into a life of virtue rather than just anarchy?
That's a very, very good and deep question, and I agree with everything that you just said. And I think that's why it's so important, going back to what we were speaking before, to be actual bearers of the gospel in everything we do, right? But, and here's a caveat, and that is that I think, because we're talking about men specifically, right? I think with men, like you said, they have been feeling wronged, ostracized, put down for ages now, for decades, right? The whole culture has been against them. So it's very tempting to take a reactionary posture and just, start fighting back in the same way as they have been fought against, right? So just like you said, in a way that desires just destruction and anarchy and just something different and that enemy to fight against. And what they're finding, so let's say A man that is feeling like that starts looking online, and what they find are messages that are very selfish in nature, messages that tell them that they are entitled to that reaction without the necessary balance that you just mentioned that our faith provides, right? Without the necessary balance of even then we are loved, even then we need to take an approach that is Christ-like, even then we need to pray for our enemies, even then we're not to cause unjust violence. So there's a lot of caveats that the faith or like guardrails that the faith offers, so that you can have that reaction and sort of have that fire, because it's, I think, until a certain point, it's healthy to feel that way. It's healthy to be like, okay, no, this is not good. This is not what am I going to do about it, right? But then the world offers you the answer, and that the answer is, just as you said, seek anarchy, seek destruction, just become angry against the system, fight back in a way that is just as immoral as the way they fight, right? We need to find them where they're at and offer them something different, which is a way to fight back that is eternal, a way to fight back that doesn't really just focus on what we're doing here. Of course, we consider it important. We know that we're here for a reason, and that we ought to strive for virtue right here, and for social change and cultural change right here. But that this is not the end goal, and that way we have that stability and that security that you mentioned, that there's a life coming afterwards, there's security in Christ, and so on.
Quick question for all the Catholic business owners listening. Are you running your business, or is your business running you through all of the admin tasks that you're doing on a regular basis? We see so many founders doing repeatable administrative tasks, and that's why we started Paraclete VA. We bridge the gap by connecting you with high-quality, Catholic, and vetted virtual assistants from all around the world who come from our existing network, so that we know we can trust them. And so can you. Many of our Catholic Founders Guild members have hired through this service and are using this to offload their finance, marketing, administrative, and other busy work, so that they can focus on what really matters and growing their business. It's the stuff that needs to get done but shouldn't be done by you. The cost is simple. Pay $500 on the day the candidate starts, and $500 if you're still happy with them after 30 days. Most hires take less than 10 days to fill. Just email admin@catholicfounders.com with a little bit about what you're looking for. We'll send you some candidates, you do some interviews. Most of the time, you'll have your hire in under 10 days, and this way you can start focusing on what really matters. Stop doing the busy work and start moving the needle.
Like the caveat that I mentioned about being bearers of the gospel is that the problem is that these men look and try to find role models and examples of people to follow, right? And they encounter people who are like externally seem very masculine, who claim that they can guide them, right? So for example, they find an Andrew Tate and they look at him, and he's muscular, he's rich, he's whatever, he has access to women, and that's things that they somehow want. So they pursue trying to imitate him. And then they look at what they see within the faith, and what they see is maybe optically and actually truly, internally, genuinely not very masculine men. I think we've failed in that manner. I think it would be different if the type of man, the average man that went to church, the average Catholic man actually was a very masculine man, very disciplined, very strict, strong, virtuous in every way. Because I think if we were to offer that alternative to the lost young guy who's searching for something different, maybe he would be more appealed to try out this whole faith thing, this whole Christianity thing. But the problem I found, and I know this because I saw it in myself, and I saw it I've seen it in many people who are looking at the churches. They see the average Catholic man, and they don't see anyone they can admire, sadly, because we have, like, the men in the church have allowed themselves to be feminized. This is not a secret, and maybe it's a little bit controversial, but it's true. It's because the gospel itself within the Catholic Church in many cases has been watered down a little bit in an effort to be less controversial, more inclusive. And the effect that has had is that men are not really finding those role models in church, and that admiration they are not looking up to the men who are devout Catholics or that claim to be devout Catholics. So there's a lot in there, but I think that our way to fight back is to actually become those virtuous men that other men can look up to, not just in spiritual matters, but also in worldly matters. Like, this is why I love Catholic founders, like you said, men who build stuff, who build businesses, who build cathedrals, who create jobs, who help the community, who are actual leaders. Because if there were more Catholic men like that, then the chances are that when a young guy is lost, he will see that and want to emulate that instead of the alternative view of masculinity that the gurus of the world offer, that very often are selfish, materialist, narcissistic, and so on.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I'm going to see if I can touch on all of them. I just want to comment on. I think number one, it's very interesting you point out the Andrew Tates of the world, because the reason it's kind of funny, honestly. Like, the reason why people are drawn to them is because they are so broken, and they just don't have that father figure that was in their life. So they go after this like loud version that, you know, they don't have words to put to, but they're attracted to it for some reason. I would venture to say, and I'd be curious to see if there's any data around this, or if anybody's done research on it. What happens is that after they go down this route, I would assume that the majority of them eventually lead to still being unfulfilled, and then they seek something even better, right? They seek a truly virtuous life that is manly in a true sense, right? Manly in the sense that it's gentle, but firm, like pursuing, having purpose, etc. It's as part of that, this is why I also think it's really important that more Catholics be willing to be public about their life. I think there are actually a lot of really good examples of good Catholic men who are virtuous, who are, you know, building good businesses and doing good things in the world, but they oftentimes don't at all talk about it publicly, or they're very, very quiet about it because they're not trying to flaunt what they have. And I think that I understand the desire to be a little bit quieter and humble about it, but I also think that they should look at the situation and recognize that there need to be role models, and that, you know, it's okay, and it's actually probably important that they share a little bit more about their life, be more open, be more out there, so that we can have better examples than Andrew Tate. Obviously, it's not helpful that the algorithms tend to, or at least they have. I'm assuming they still do. They tend to promote kind of like audacious things that are just like really, like, you know, attention grabbing. But anybody who's truly looking for that like meaningful life, I know that they'll find it in, you know, virtuous manhood, because that's how God created us. He created us to desire that deep down.
Yeah.
You have a
Regarding,
comment?
I just want to say one quick thing, and like echoing what you said about maybe like understanding that it's not natural to maybe want to be more humble about it and not communicate too much. But I do think that after a certain point, it becomes a duty to just be out there, you know, precisely because, and actually, like, you know, in my analysis of many segments of the Bible, this is actually a call that we all have, you know, like Christ commands his apostles to be the light of the world, the salt of the world. He tells them explicitly, you are the light of the world, a light, like you don't hide a lamp under the bed. You know? A city on the top of a hill cannot be hidden. Like, we are supposed to be out there, like reflecting the light of Christ, not in a prideful way. And that's the struggle. And that's the constant, like, spiritual battle that you have to face, not to fall for the lies of the enemy and glorify yourself, right? But always remember to point to Christ. But we are, in fact, commanded to be out there, you know, being that light. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
That's an interesting point. We haven't really gone deep in this. I'd be curious if somebody has written about this in like deep research, but it's fascinating to consider the idea that we have both responsibility to talk publicly about this stuff, right? In a way that it could, if we have the wrong disposition, bring attention to ourselves. But if we are truly doing this well, we can direct that attention to God. Like when somebody gives you a compliment, you can direct, like, you know, thank you, and you send it towards God. You kind of like, you can in a way deflect it in a way that's sending it to the original source. And it's something we don't have time to talk about today, or I don't know what the answers for, but it is fascinating to consider that, like, duty to be visible, but the responsibility to also, in obedience, like share, you know, say that this is God's, right? There's one other thing I'm kind of curious about, and I think that I'll try to set this up, and then we'll talk about the importance of entrepreneurship, especially in this age. I think that deep down, part of the reason why men are kind of being drawn to these Andrew Tates of the world and other things, we metaphysically are created to conquer in some ways, right? There was a priest who gave a talk a while ago that I heard that explained that in art we can identify that the way a man's body is created and the way a woman's body are created very different. They invoke different psychological reactions, so to speak. And the man, he explained, I can't remember his exact points, but he just like shows like all these different images of paintings of the male body that we are made to conquer in some ways. And we're not exactly, I mean, obviously there's some wars going on, but this is not like the Greeks and the Romans where we're not just going out and conquering that way. And there's not necessarily new land to conquer, right? There's no frontier right now. Technology and entrepreneurship have become that frontier in many ways. That's why I think entrepreneurship is important, because it's one of the only ways that we can conquer now that is involving others as well. Because you can conquer in a way of like becoming an athlete and like winning a marathon. That's super not interesting to me. I do not want to have a runner's body. No offense to runners, but the point is we need to conquer, and I think that entrepreneurship is an answer to that. Whether it is just simply providing for your family and having a side hustle in addition to your business or your day job, or whether it's actually starting something. So I'm kind of curious to get your general take on that and the role that you think entrepreneurship can play, or maybe should play, in helping men like develop that sense of purpose, of virtue, as well as steering the culture where we want to go.
Yeah, I love that. I love that point about us being made to conquer, and I fully agree. I think a saint has a quote about it, and what he ends up concluding is that we Catholics and followers of Christ, we don't seek to conquer land through force, but through the gospel, through love of the gospel, and that's also a form of conquering. Conquering the minds of people. You conquer when you, for example, manage to make a country Catholic. That's a conquest, right? So yeah, that's one example of that conquest. Another one is just conquering yourself and conquering that virtue that you're striving towards. Reaching holiness, I actually wrote an essay about it that hasn't been published yet, but the ultimate, like that drive to conquer is supernatural. And thus it's only fit for a supernatural goal, like holiness, the most ambitious goal of all. So that's just another interesting thing about that drive to conquer. Regarding entrepreneurship, exactly, I do agree that that's another way in which we can exercise that drive in an orderly way. Not just entrepreneurship, like you could also, for example, do it through artistic pursuits in a way that also reaches a lot of hearts and minds and thus conquer in that way, like a broad audience or whatever. But speaking specifically about entrepreneurship, I actually fully agree, and I think it's very fitting that you mentioned that, not only because of the podcast that we're in, Catholic Founders, but also because I wrote an article about how it's super important to provide like options for an alternative economy in which you know that you are not funding, as a consumer, first and foremost, that you are not funding immoral companies, immoral practices, and companies that are going to be, for example, promoting the gender agenda every June or July, whatever the month is. And like we have a responsibility to give consumers an option to support something that actually aligns with their values first. And then secondly, as men, as you said, I do find that in building something is that we really connect with that drive and that God-given desire to conquer and to grow and to build something. And the best way to do it, especially nowadays, because of all the tools we have, all the opportunities we have, is by building a business. It doesn't have to be an online business. It can be a physical business. It can be a local business, a real world business in that way. But it's definitely easier and cheaper to start a business than it ever has been before. Yeah. It's actually insane how much you can grow a business without paying almost anything. A couple of softwares maybe, and that's it. So I do think that for all men who are listening, there's something, like you said, transcendent, and there's something deeper to building a business as a Catholic, and that is precisely participating in God's creative nature, right? Mm-hmm. That He has imbued in us by allowing us, or by you creating something beautiful, creating something that brings good into the world, creating something that drives the culture forward. It really connects with something that, with a deep longing of your heart, and that is to build something big, to conquer in that way, as you mentioned.
Yeah. One thing I would just note for people who are, thinking about this, if this is your first time considering entrepreneurship from a perspective of like fulfillment and conquering, you got to remember that it's not about just finding a way to make money, because anybody can pursue something to make money. But the people who build the best businesses or the biggest businesses typically are the ones who are very focused on and obsessed with conquering that space in a way where, they become very like the best of the best because they put a lot of effort into it. They're not just seeking to throw a couple things together and get rich quick. Like those people, there are people like that. But a lot of times they do not really achieve any sort of like true material success. It's going to be a slog. There's going to be suffering involved. Don't think it's going to be easy, but that's okay, right? There's a role that kind of the toil. I forget the exact. I heard this recently, but somebody pointed out that there's something about through suffering you become much more fulfilled about the outcome. I forget the exact psychological phenomena, but it's just worth noting that to people who are considering this. Now, I am curious. What do you, so you want to help restore, you said your mission is dedicated to restoring virtue and morality in the modern world. What do you think in your eyes, what would the future look like if we do truly have a world where this new era of Christian masculinity exists? What would that look like in practice? A Catholic founder is somebody who recognizes that they are called to be an instrument of God's will in the world. We're not building a business for our own sake. We are simply stewards. If that describes how you think about entrepreneurship, we want you in the Catholic Founders Guild. We're growing an association of Catholic business owners who believe in these things deeply so that we can invest in, buy from, and support one another. We do this through our exclusive membership directory, monthly group calls, and our group chat. But there's a lot more to it than that. The Guild has a lot to offer. The cost is only $10 a month or $100 a year. So if you believe that you were created to create, join the Catholic Founders Guild today. You can do so by going to catholicfounders.com/subscribe and upgrade to any paid subscription. See you in the Guild.
It's difficult not to fall for the temptation of trying to think we can have heaven on earth, but I do think we can get close to it, at least for moments, if we do what we're supposed to do, right? So I think if we actually are successful in promoting virtue, in allowing or helping young men specifically find their way to the church, find their way to Christ, develop a true, honest relationship with him, I think the first thing we're going to see, and probably the most important, is ordered relationships again. Like, one of the main culprits of the downfall of Western culture is the sexual revolution, the destruction of the nuclear family, how disordered our relationships have become. Not just when it comes to marriages, but just in general. So I think one of the first things that happens when you start ordering your life towards virtue is that relationships become ordered again, right? So men take on the role of men in a relationship, women take the role of women in a relationship, kids take the role of kids and children in the relationship, in the family, and that allows for a stable foundation upon which we can then build a more stable culture. So I think that's going to be, hopefully, one of the main changes that comes. And I do think that societies move in cycles. I do think we're at the beginning of a new cycle, or like a new stage of that cycle, a new turn of that cycle, where, like we said, we are seeking once again human things. We're seeking once again transcendent things, because we have tried this whole, pursue whatever freedom you want and do whatever you want. And we are seeing that it's not enough, that it's not fulfilling, that it doesn't help anyone. So I think we're going to be seeing over the next couple of decades a return to that tradition, in a way, of being more human, of being more ordered, of putting more of an emphasis in family and relationships, as opposed to things like a career and whatnot, and money and whatnot. So I do think the future is very hopeful, honestly. I think, of course, there's a lot of things that are beyond our control, but I think if we all made that effort to live virtuously, well, first, I am a big believer that it has to start with us men, because we've been given the leadership role. And that means that if we change some stuff, or if we start acting a certain way, the culture will follow, and probably women will follow as well. This doesn't mean that women don't have a responsibility to also intentionally and on their own start acting virtuously. But for broad cultural, societal change to happen, it has to start with the men. That's my take, at least. So I think if we actually start doing that, slowly things will become more orderly. Slowly relationships will start to become ordered again. People will start focusing more on family and relationships than material things. And then we can maybe start building a culture that isn't what we have right now. Like this free-for-all rat race, everyone in it for themselves, trying to just get what they can and leave. And yeah, that's the way I see it progressing, hopefully.
It's very interesting. There's a lot of people who talk about this. Like, I hear it all over the internet with various types of people, faithful or not, that many people believe there will be a permanent underclass because of AI. I'm actually not of that opinion, but a lot of people are seeing it as like, we got to make some hay while the sun's shining and make our money now, because in a couple years it's just going to be, if we don't have any money, you're not going to have any again. And the fact that they think that is quite wild to me, that they would be willing to pursue that selfishly. But I like this a lot. I appreciate the perspective. I also want to encourage anybody who does feel like discouraged. I'm also very optimistic, but anybody who feels discouraged, remember that God did not have you born into this time in history accidentally. Like, you have all of the grace necessary. You have all of the skills necessary at your fingertips to be able to navigate this well. And a priest once told me that we are judged primarily based off of the challenges of the age. Like, are we faithful to God in whatever way the current society, whether that's now or 300 years ago, are we faithful in the way that we ought to be, kind of juxtaposing the key issues that are facing the society? And he points out that the two key ones were, he gave a talk on this like a year ago, are faithfulness to Christ in general and purity, right? Those are the two like biggest, in his mind, two of the biggest challenges of our age. So, despite it being hard, I would encourage people that you have all of the necessary resources and the grace that God gave you, God gave all of us, to persevere and be true leaders in this time. Last big topic, and then we'll do rapid fire.
Can I add one more thing? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
To that you said, like that message of hope, which I think is very fitting. Also, well, one of my big flaws is that I remember quotes, but not the authors. I remember, I don't know where I read this, but someone said that it's at times like this, that halos are hanging from the lowest branches. And I think that's a beautiful, very hopeful statement. And that is that holiness is there for the taking, especially when you're like in a world so surrounded by darkness. And just echoing what you said, that like we were born at this time for a specific reason. Maybe that reason is to become saints, saints who can then allow for this culture and for this darkness to go away. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, like sanctity and holiness is there for the taking. It's really up to you to decide to be one of the few ones who are a light in this world, and the encouragement and the motivation is for you to actually do it and strive to become a saint.
Yeah, absolutely. So last big one here. Do you think Catholics and Christians generally should pursue wealth? And are there any caveats to that, like the specific and intentional pursuit of wealth?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. The caveat is after discerning if that's what, like if after discerning if your vocation is actually not going to be a religious life, of course, first and foremost. And then secondly, always keeping in mind that while you might be striving for it, you might not get there. Like remembering always that the end result is up to God, and that you are free and allowed to pursue wealth. And maybe many of us will be called to it, right? You cannot be attached to the end result. You cannot attach your worth, your identity to that end result of being wealthy, right? So I think you can like exercise the pursuit of your free will in pursuing that in a way that is moral and virtuous, of course. And those are the caveats, basically. Just do it in a way that is moral, virtuous, and don't let money or the pursuit of success take the center stage in your life. But I am of the perspective that if you have the qualities, if you've been gifted with maybe good education, an intellectual capacity above average, good ideas, a creative spirit, you probably have a responsibility to pursue that, because we are also called to compete in the playing fields of the world. And I wrote this in my first book, like if we don't do that, then immoral men and godless men will do that and will pursue wealth. And what ends up happening is what's happening now, right? That the entire wealth of the world is controlled by, I don't want to claim everyone is, but many pedophiles, satanics, people who are completely backwards and evil. So if we are not, and in a way, it's because we have chosen not to rise to positions of influence, to positions of wealth as Catholics, right? So I think if you have those capacities, if you discern it properly, and if you feel like God is calling you to maybe build something big in the world, then you probably have a responsibility to answer that and to compete in the playing fields of the world as well with the godless men who will definitely pursue those goals.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's hard for us to visualize what it could be like. Again, I would caveat one other thing, is that your measurement of your quote-unquote success should first be based off of, with a spiritual director in tow, do I live a life that's virtuous? Is my life virtuous first and foremost? And if my pursuit of wealth is detracting or distracting me from that, I have to rightly order these things. But then once those things are in order, there's so many components of living a virtuous life that allow you to pursue building wealth. And especially if you are doing it for the right purposes that you alluded to, like you have a responsibility because you were given gifts, you were given interest and all these like talents. It is not, again, everybody brings this up. I bring this up all the time. The parable of the talents, right? Think about how bad it was for the person who didn't do anything with their talent. They just buried it. They were cast off. It was not pretty. And my general perspective is that many Catholics, especially Catholic men, are burying their talents and they are lazy. They're using the excuse of, I don't want to pursue wealth. I'm trying to be humble. They're using that as an excuse not to put their skills to use. And that is wrong as well. I always bring up the example. If you were born to be the successor to a throne, if you're, the son of the king, and you decide to reject that and you go, just do something else, that is also not okay. Not okay. You were literally born to do that.
Yeah.
And all of us have our own version of what we are born to do, and it's up to us to rise to the occasion and ask God for the graces to remain humble as we do it, because it all is for His glory. So, any other comments before we go to rapid fire?
Yeah, no, I want to just mention that it's like you said at the end. I completely agree. It's usually just a cop out and just an excuse for cowardice to not put yourself out there and try. It's way easier to just accept what is, not try to build anything better, not try to go anywhere better, not try to be better in any way. Because when you do that, you're risking failure, and failure hurts. So the coward's way out is just using this false humility, like you said, to masquerade a cowardice that keeps you from actually doing what you need, like what your duty is, and that is to put your talents to good use.
Amen. All right, rapid fire. What is your favorite scripture?
Isaiah 6:8. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Who shall I send and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, Lord, send me." I think that's very fitting as well for what we're speaking about.
Amazing. I like that. That's not something somebody has brought up before. And who is your favorite entrepreneur?
Favorite entrepreneur. I've been away from the tech world and entrepreneurship world for so long that I cannot think of anyone. There's a Colombian entrepreneur who has a very good life story. He's called Arturo Calle. He came from nothing and he built a very big, very fancy brand here in Colombia. So I like him.
Okay, I like that. I'll have to look him up. Who's your favorite saint?
Saint Francis of Assisi. And mainly because we're very different. So I think I have a lot to learn from him.
I like that. And then favorite devotion?
How do you mean favorite devotion?
Like the rosary, mass, confession,
okay.
What are those things?
Good question. I would say confession. It's been absolutely life-changing for me ever since I came back to the church. Like confession has been the cheat code for everything. It's insane. I love it.
Yeah. There's a book. I haven't read it in total yet, but Dave Duran wrote a book called The Fountain of Youth, and it's about confession.
Really?
So yeah, it's a very small read. I probably should just get through it, but it's been a little crazy over here. But anyways, man, where should people follow you, and any final calls to action?
Just to drop a follow on the Substack. It's www.adeternum.com. Then you can also follow me on Instagram at adeternum.media. If any of you listening speak Spanish, there's also the Spanish version of Ad Eternum at esp.adeternum.com or Ad Eternum ESP on Instagram. And then, from there you can find the YouTube channel, my books and whatnot. Just reach out and drop a message if you came from Catholic Founders and let me know what you thought about the episode.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Juan. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, brother.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode with Juan Dominguez. I hope you really enjoyed it. I'm going to leave you with a couple of my biggest takeaways. So first, remember the phrase that Juan shared. At times like these, halos are hanging from the lowest branches. It's pretty powerful, very poetic as well. It reminds me a lot of that idea that there's a crown in the gutter, many crowns in the gutter waiting for somebody to pick them up. So he's basically saying, do not let the chaos of the modern world or the pressures of the news cycle discourage you. You were born at this specific time in history for a reason. You have all the grace you need to become a saint right where you are. That's something we talk about a lot. You were not born in another age. You were born here and now for a very specific reason. Look around you, see the opportunities for your own salvation and for how you're going to bring other people to salvation, to know God. Secondly, consider his challenge regarding entrepreneurship. If you have been, given talents, skills, and the capacity to build something, you actually have a duty to put those talents to good use for those around you. Don't hide behind some sort of, false sense of humility to mask cowardice. If you are called to build, then build and do it for the glory of God. It's very easy to lean into these things. As long as you stop thinking about yourself and start saying, how can I build for God? How can I glorify God through my work? It becomes much easier and you'll stop having so much apprehension. All right, folks, please note that we, speaking of the world, are competing with all of the noise of the world. And your reviews and shares really do help us to reach other people who need to hear this message, other entrepreneurs who are Catholic and who are pretty serious about their faith, but they need a little bit more of a prodding to go a little deeper in how they integrate their faith and the ways that they can be courageous. So please share this. Go follow us on Substack if you're not listening on Substack already. Go follow us on YouTube. Give us a subscribe there. If we get a lot of subscribers on YouTube, it'll really help us to continue getting more reach every time we publish an episode. So that's an automatic algorithm booster. So please do that. It only takes you a couple seconds. And even if you're not watching on YouTube, it still does help us a lot. Also, if you are looking to be surrounded by other Catholics who are building businesses and who are trying to live a life of virtue as they do this and integrate that faith into their business, consider joining the Catholic Founders Guild. We have built a group of incredible individuals who are committed to helping each other grow and scale, all while keeping the faith as the number one priority in our lives. You can check it out at catholicfounders.com/subscribe. And thank you guys so much for tuning in today. God bless you. And as always, do not forget that you were created to create. God bless you and see you next time on Catholic Founders.